They thought they'd scored another easy arrest. Two racist cops targeting a black man on vacation with his family. But when their smugness turns to shock, they discover the man in handcuffs is no ordinary tourist. He's their soon-to-be boss, the new chief of police, and their careers are about to unravel in the most unexpected way. Marcus Reynolds sat back in his seat, soaking in the sound of waves crashing against the shore. His wife, Alicia, was beside him, sipping on a cold lemonade, their two children building sandcastles nearby. The vacation had been long overdue, a rare moment of escape from the pressures of his career and a chance to reconnect with his family. Marcus had always been the kind of man who worked tirelessly for everything he had. Growing up in a poor neighborhood, he had beaten the odds, climbing through the ranks of the police force with a sense of integrity and fairness that made him respected by all who knew him. Now, after years of dedication, he had been offered the role of chief of police in a small but prosperous coastal town. The announcement was to be made in a few days, but for now he wanted to enjoy this rare, peaceful break with his family. "Marcus, look at them," Alicia said, nodding toward their children. "They're having the time of their lives." He smiled, watching their son and daughter laughing as they decorated their sandcastle. "Yeah, they deserve this," he said. "We all do." Marcus had no idea how true his words would ring in the coming hours. This peaceful vacation would soon take an unexpected turn, one that would test his patience, his composure, and ultimately his sense of justice. On the other side of town, Jake sat in the driver's seat of his patrol car, tapping impatiently on the steering wheel. Beside him, Ryan leaned back, arms crossed, looking out the window with a scowl. "Tourist season again," Ryan muttered. "Means more of them showing up." Jake nodded in agreement, his gaze hardening as a group of black tourists strolled past on the sidewalk. "Yeah, well, you know what that means. More trouble for us." Both men shared a quiet laugh, each knowing the unspoken rules they followed. They had been on the force together for years, and their racism was an open secret. They prided themselves on keeping certain people in check. It was their town, their turf, and they weren't about to let outsiders, especially black ones, disrupt it. "Look at this," Jake said, his eyes narrowing as he spotted Marcus and his family walking along the beachfront, heading toward a small local shop. "Big guy like that, probably up to no good." Ryan grinned. "Yeah, let's keep an eye on him. Could be one of those types who come in here thinking they own the place." They followed Marcus and his family at a distance, their minds already made up about who he was. To them, he was just another black man who didn't belong, a threat to their small, predominantly white town. They didn't see the man who had worked hard his entire life, a man on the verge of leading their very department. All they saw was the color of his skin, and that was enough for them to justify their actions. As Marcus and his family stopped in front of a local store, Jake and Ryan exchanged a glance. This was their chance. They pulled up next to the sidewalk, stepping out of the car with an air of authority, ready to confront Marcus and remind him who really had control in this town. "Hey, you!" Jake called out, his voice sharp and filled with disdain. "Got a minute?" Marcus turned, his eyes calm but curious, as the officers approached him. Little did they know, the man they were about to confront was no ordinary tourist. He was their future boss. But for now, all they saw was a target. Marcus looked up as the two officers approached, their expressions hard, their postures aggressive. He instinctively placed a hand on his son's shoulder, sensing that this was not going to be a casual interaction. Alicia stepped closer to him, her eyes filled with quiet concern. She'd seen this kind of thing before, too many times. "Something wrong, officers?" Marcus asked calmly, standing tall but relaxed. Jake, the more aggressive of the two, eyed Marcus with a sneer. "We got reports of a suspicious individual matching your description around here. Mind showing us some ID?" Marcus raised an eyebrow, his tone still measured. "Suspicious? We're just enjoying a family vacation. What exactly did this person do?" "Don't get smart with us," Ryan snapped. "We're asking the questions here." "ID." Now, Marcus nodded, his instincts telling him that things could escalate quickly if he didn't comply. He reached slowly into his back pocket, retrieving his wallet, and handed over his driver's license. As Jake snatched it from his hand, Marcus felt his teenage son Jamal tense beside him. The boy pulled out his phone, subtly starting to record the interaction. He knew from stories and lessons from his father that encounters like these could turn dangerous. Jake barely glanced at the ID before handing it to Ryan. The two officers exchanged a look, clearly uninterested in what it said. They weren't concerned with who Marcus actually was. They had already made up their minds. "This ID looks fake," Ryan muttered under his breath, loud enough for Marcus to hear. Alicia's eyes widened in disbelief. "Fake? Are you serious? You're harassing us for no reason." "Ma'am, I suggest you step back," Jake warned, stepping closer to Marcus. "We're doing our job here. You think you can just walk around acting suspicious without consequences?" Marcus could feel his temper rising, but he forced himself to remain calm. "We're not acting suspicious. We're on vacation, like a lot of other families here. You've got no reason to treat us like criminals." Jake smirked, taking a step forward. "I'll decide who looks like a criminal. You're under arrest for resisting." Before Marcus could react, Jake grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back, roughly slapping handcuffs on his wrists. Jamal's phone trembled in his hand as he recorded, while Alicia let out a cry of protest. Their youngest daughter, only 8 years old, clutched her mother's leg, terrified by the sudden turn of events. "You can't do this," Alicia shouted. "He hasn't done anything." Jake pushed Marcus toward the patrol car, ignoring her protests. "Tell it to the judge." Inside the small, dimly lit holding cell at the station, Marcus sat on a cold metal bench, still in handcuffs. His mind raced, not out of fear, but out of disbelief at how far these officers had gone. He had been arrested before for no reason, but this was different. This time, he was supposed to be the one in charge. Jake and Ryan, meanwhile, stood outside the cell, leaning against the doorframe, laughing among themselves as they discussed the arrest. To them, this was just another day of enforcing their version of order. "Man, you should have seen the look on his face," Jake chuckled. He thought he could talk his way out of it. Ryan smirked, glancing toward the holding cell. "Bet he didn't expect to spend his vacation in there. Some people just don't know when to shut up." As they continued to mock Marcus, his wife Alicia sat in the station's waiting area, her hands gripping her phone. She had already contacted a lawyer, but what worried her more was the look on Marcus's face as he was taken away. He had remained calm, but she knew that inside this was eating at him. He had always preached patience and composure, especially when dealing with law enforcement. But this was personal. In the holding cell, Marcus remained still, his mind focused on what would happen next. He knew he could clear this up, but the humiliation of being dragged through the mud like this, in front of his family, was more than frustrating. He had worked his entire life to avoid situations like this, and now, as a man of power and responsibility, he was forced to endure it again. Outside, Ryan pulled out his phone, gloating as he prepared to call their superior about the big arrest they had just made. Little did he know, this phone call would change everything. In the office of the station's captain, the phone rang. The captain, an experienced officer nearing retirement, answered with a gruff tone. On the other end of the line was the mayor of the town, checking in on the police force and, more importantly, the arrival of their newly appointed chief of police, Marcus Reynolds. "So, how's the department preparing for Marcus Reynolds' arrival?" "I trust you've got everything in order?" the mayor asked cheerfully. The captain's face paled. "Marcus Reynolds? We've got everything ready. He should be arriving any day now," he stammered, already sensing something was wrong. "Any day now?" The mayor laughed. "Well, I expect you'll be giving him a warm welcome, seeing as he's already in town with his family. He's a big deal, you know. That man's going to turn this department around." The captain froze. "He's already here?" The mayor's cheerful tone continued. "Yep. Vacationing with his family for a few days before he officially starts. I'm sure you'll meet him soon." The captain hung up the phone, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He jumped from his seat, racing out of the office toward the holding cells, his mind racing. If Marcus Reynolds was already in town, there could only be one explanation for why he hadn't made contact yet. His officers had done something stupid. Really stupid. He arrived at the holding cell area, where Jake and Ryan were still casually chatting, oblivious to the bombshell about to drop on them. The captain stormed over, his face flushed with fury. "What the hell is going on here?" he barked. Jake smirked, looking over at the captain. "Oh, we got ourselves a big fish. Guy looked suspicious, so we brought him in." "Suspicious?" The captain's voice shook with anger. "Do you know who that is?" Ryan shrugged, unfazed. "Some tourist. Looked like trouble." "That tourist is Marcus Reynolds," the captain shouted. "Your new boss, chief of police." The room went silent. Jake and Ryan's smug expressions disappeared in an instant, replaced by wide-eyed shock and panic. "Wait, what?" Jake stammered. "You idiots arrested the chief of police," the captain yelled. "You've just ruined your careers." Marcus, still in the cell, stood up and approached the bars, his face calm but stern. He had been listening to the entire exchange. Jake and Ryan turned to face him, their faces ashen, realizing the gravity of their mistake. Jake and Ryan stood frozen, their faces drained of color. The captain's words echoed in their heads, but it took a moment for the full weight of the situation to sink in. Marcus Reynolds, the man they had so confidently arrested, was their new boss, chief of police. "Sir," Jake began, his voice shaky, "we didn't know. We thought—" Marcus stepped closer to the bars, his gaze steady and calm. He spoke with authority, but without raising his voice. "Thought what? That because I'm black, I must be a criminal? That my family and I couldn't possibly be here on vacation, just like every other family in this town?" Ryan fumbled for words, his bravado from earlier completely gone. We didn't mean we were just doing our jobs." "Your jobs," Marcus repeated, his voice calm but sharp. "Your job is to protect and serve the public, not to harass them. You saw me, you saw my family, and you made assumptions. That's not policing, that's profiling." The captain, still furious, cut in. "You two are in serious trouble. This department won't tolerate this kind of behavior, especially not now that Marcus is in charge." Marcus raised a hand to stop the captain from continuing. "I appreciate that, but I'll handle this myself." The captain nodded, stepping back reluctantly, leaving the floor to Marcus. Jake and Ryan stared at Marcus, their expressions shifting from panic to desperation. They knew what was coming, and there was no way out of it. "Do you know why I accepted the position as chief of police?" Marcus asked, looking them both in the eye. "Because I believed that this department could be better. I believed that people like you could be taught to serve with dignity, respect, and fairness. But today you showed me that there's still a lot of work to be done." Jake and Ryan stood silent, shame washing over them. Marcus continued, "You'll face disciplinary action for this, racial profiling, wrongful arrest, abuse of power. All of it will be thoroughly investigated, and you will be held accountable." Jake, still hoping to salvage the situation, spoke up. "Sir, we made a mistake. It won't happen again. Please, just give us another chance." Marcus held his gaze, his expression stern. "This isn't about one mistake, Jake. This is about a pattern of behavior. You two have been getting away with this for too long, and now it ends." Ryan, realizing that pleading wouldn't work, simply hung his head. They had crossed the line and they knew it. Marcus gave them one last look before turning away. "I'll be making changes around here, and those changes start with you." After the confrontation, Marcus was released from the holding cell, his handcuffs removed. He walked out of the station, his mind already racing with the plans he would set in motion once he officially took the reins. But first, he needed to see his family. Outside, Alicia was waiting anxiously, her hands still clenched around her phone. The moment she saw Marcus step out, free and unharmed, she rushed to him, pulling him into a tight embrace. Their children, who had been watching nervously from a distance, ran to their father, relief flooding their young faces. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," Marcus said softly to his wife as he held her close. Alicia pulled back, looking up at him with fierce determination in her eyes. "We'll get through it, Marcus. You always keep your head high. You always fight the right fight." Jamal, their teenage son, approached, phone still in hand. "Dad, I recorded everything. Just in case." Marcus smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "Good thinking, son. We'll probably need that footage for later." As the family regrouped, Marcus turned his attention back to the station. He could feel the eyes of the officers inside watching him through the windows. Some were sympathetic, while others were still in shock, unsure of what the future would hold with Marcus now in charge. "We'll head back to the hotel for now," Marcus said to his family. "But after this vacation, there's going to be a lot of changes around here." Alicia nodded, knowing her husband well enough to understand that this incident wouldn't just blow over. It would fuel his drive to make a real difference in this town, starting with the police force. She knew he was up for the challenge. 2 weeks later, Marcus Reynolds walked into the police station as the officially appointed chief of police. His presence was commanding, and the atmosphere in the station had shifted significantly. Officers who had once felt untouchable were now on edge, knowing that Marcus had no tolerance for misconduct. Change was in the air. Jake and Ryan had been suspended pending a full investigation. The video Jamal had recorded was reviewed, and combined with their past behavior, the evidence was damning. The department was cleaning house, and Marcus was leading the charge. On his first day, Marcus held a meeting with the entire police force. He stood at the front of the room, looking out over the faces of his officers, some of whom were nervous, while others were hopeful. They knew things were going to be different, and Marcus wasted no time laying out his vision. "This department will no longer tolerate racism, profiling, or abuse of power," Marcus began, his voice strong and clear. "We are here to serve and protect every member of this community, regardless of the color of their skin. That is the standard I expect from every single one of you." He paused, letting his words sink in. "There will be accountability. There will be consequences for those who choose to act outside the law. But for those of you who are here to do the right thing, to serve this community with integrity and fairness, you have nothing to fear. Together we can rebuild the trust that's been lost." As Marcus spoke, the officers in the room began to nod, slowly but surely. They could see that he wasn't just talking about changes. He was here to make them happen, and he wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. Outside, as the meeting ended and the officers dispersed, Jake and Ryan were quietly packing up their desks. Their careers in this town were over, and they knew they had no one to blame but themselves. The weight of their actions had caught up with them. As Marcus passed by, Jake glanced up, catching his eye. There was no hostility, only resignation. Marcus gave him a simple nod, an acknowledgement that justice had been served. The story ended with Marcus walking out of the station into the bright sunlight, ready to lead the town's police force into a new era. His family was waiting for him at home, proud of the man who had stood up for what was right, even when faced with adversity. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, but for now, justice had prevailed, and the town would never be the same.